So hello, I'm Frank Martignetti. I'm here in the Noya room at the First Church Congregational in Fairfield talking to my dear friend and colleague John Polo as part of our 70th anniversary of the chapter series of interviewing longtime members and leaders for their memories and oral history of our wonderful organization. So John, thanks for joining us.
Hey, well, it's nice to be here and make it, to see the organization get to 75 years.
It's amazing, isn't it? So tell us, when did you become involved in the AGO and the Bridgeport chapter?
Well, it's not being a professional musician, but I'm one of those musicians that's an engineer, and lots of engineering people tend to have math and music go together.
Yeah.
So I had the natural tendency to play piano, and then from the piano, I happen to have a hearing deficiency, so that led me to play the organ, which I could hear a lot better. And as you play piano, you play organ, and people hear you play, and I was musically gifted. I would play, they would ask me to play at church. But, when it came down to actually, practicing and going to piano lessons, organ lessons, I was the world's worst. As much as I'm a type A personality in business, I'm lousy when it comes to keep my nose to the ground. But someplace along the line, we had an AGO organist at church, and she introduced me to David Tate from the Westport School of Music, and convinced me to take piano lessons at the Westport School of Music. And like now, as you get to be a young adult and you haven't taken piano lessons, organ lessons when you're small, you still don't want to practice. So David was smart enough to say, I'm going to make you perform in church. I don't care how simple your piece is going to be, but I want to make sure you play it the way it's actually written. So that got me going, and little by little, the AGO organist knew Paul Knox. And Paul Knox immediately could see that even though I was not a trained organist, the AGO chapter at that time lacked business skills. And he was worried about the longevity of the chapter because as organists, we didn't have a lot to offer each other. And at that time, believe it or not, Catholic churches were not part of the group. So it was only the Protestant churches and one or two synagogues. So me being a business guy, I didn't see any difference. An organ was an organ was an organ. And we had access at that time. The dean was Marie Lambert, and she was from General Electric. So they had a pot of money, and with that pot of money, she said, we can actually send out communications with GE money to all church organists. And we built up our organist base first from like 35 to 120.
Oh, wow.
And then Yale chapter had fallen apart at the time. And through that process, I got more involved with Walden Moore and found out some of the problems that they were having is that the AGO was either geared to part-time organists or full-time organists. But the full-time organists were so busy, we couldn't help the part-time organists. So the biggest need they all had was their compensation wasn't correct. And AGO National Organization did not do anything about compensation. I'm a business guy, and so I said, well, I asked Paul, I said, if I do a private survey of the chapters in Connecticut, now I have GE money. Do you think I can, they'll actually give me their salary information? And he said, oh, no, they're a bunch of chatty Cathys, they won't give you the information. But lo and behold, he had me talk to Walden Moore at First Trinity Church in Haven. And Walden said, I think a person like you that's got a business background is not one of us, a trained organist. I think they would actually tell you.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, we started in Bridgeport, and then everybody in New Haven all the way to Madison said we want in. Then everybody from Bridgeport all the way to the New York border, they wanted in. So all of a sudden we collected about 175 salary compensation ratings, and I was able to turn it into a professional concerns book. And AGO National heard about it. So from that, we actually created what we called the Pink Book. And not only did we look at organist salaries, we started setting weddings salaries. It drew all the Catholic churches in, and we included all the funeral directors in. So the funeral directors all of a sudden saw what the substitute rates were going to be for an organist to play in a church. So it leveled the playing field for everybody.
Wow.
And part of that, it's a little jealousy factor because the Catholics were very, very low paid versus the Protestants.
Yeah.
And for the Catholics to get in the game, they really, to raise their music level, they had to pay more money.
Pay a living wage, yeah.
And, a piece of history, part of the history is in 1997 when Carolina Flores came to the area. That was the first Catholic church. We checked the salary from $4,000 to $32,000.
It was $4,000 to
$4,000.
play how many masses a week?
It was like 5 masses, but the difference, he was able, because he got 104 funerals and 110 weddings,
Sure.
that made up the pay. I got her $32,000, and she still got all the weddings and all the funerals.
Yeah, well, that's a job that you're there 6 to 7 days a week. I mean, it's a busy place.
But interesting enough, I didn't realize that the Catholic Church compete. Next thing I know, she left Assumption to get Assumption raised their dollars.
So the rising tide lifted everyone.
St. Mark's did the same thing, so it helped everybody.
That's great.
Yeah.
So just to come back to some of that, so how old were you when you started playing the piano or the organ?
I started playing probably when I was 9 or 10, and like most kids, I played the piano, but I would watch the organist play the organ, and I played by ear a lot. So, she looked at me and she said, "Well, back then churches were open all the time, like First Church," and she would say, "Well, here's the key. The key's hidden over here. So if you want to play the organ," so I used to get up and play the organ, but I would play exactly whatever she played. So if I heard her play an introduction to something, I'd play that same introduction.
Were you mimicking it by ear?
Mimicking by ear.
And you were how old again? 10?
Probably 8 or 9. I could barely reach the pedal. So my big debut was when she happened to be sick, and it was around Easter time. I don't know if it was Easter Day, but they said Gladys Wade is not here, and Gladys Wade was a teacher that Meg Williams and I both had.
Okay.
And they said, "She's not here today," and I raised my hand and said, "I can play." And I went up there, and my mother and father said, "Nobody no one sang. We're just too busy looking at this little kid playing this big hall pipe organ."
Yeah. What church was this?
Woodmont Union Chapel, in an old hall church.
Woodmont Union Chapel.
Still there today. It's on
Milford
Haven Avenue. But it was an old church at the time, and it was a hall pipe organ, like the worst of the world. But for a kid to play that at 8 or 9 or 10 years old,
it's a
it's
thrill.
pretty wild.
Yeah.
And so that was when I started playing the organ.
Awesome. And so, but when did you start to take lessons, and when did you meet Paul Knox and Walden?
Paul Knox was hired by my aunt, was the assistant organist at United Congregational Church in Bridgeport. So I remember as a kid, now that I played the organ a little bit, she was the assistant organist at United with a 4-manual, 53-rank pipe organ.
Yeah.
You bring a 10-year-old to look at that thing, and I was scared. I mean, that thing looked like it had teeth.
Yeah.
4 manuals and bunches of buttons, and then it was dark. I was like, I thought it was Halloween.
Yeah. It's funny.
But little by little, she convinced me that her other friend was C.O. Wright at Radio City Music Hall.
Oh.
So she grabbed me by the hand at about 10 years old. She brought me to Radio City Music Hall, and C.O. Wright said, "Are you afraid to play in public?" And I said, "I don't think so." So he puts me on the Rockefeller, on the Radio City Music Hall organ on the left side.
Yeah.
And he says, we're gonna push this button, you're gonna come out in the hall, and then you're gonna keep playing. What can you play? And it was, I don't know, Santa Claus is coming to town or something.
Wow.
And I played at Radio City, and out came the organ. This was when they did organ between the movies, in the movies. So I probably lasted probably a half a minute, but it felt to me like it was hours.
Yeah. That's amazing. So you met Paul when he first came to United.
I met Paul after that, so much actually later. We both know Bob Chalalian. Bob Chalalian was the best friend of my aunt.
Who was the longtime board chair for the
He was the
Bridgeport
board
Symphony.
So when they hired Paul Knox, now Paul Knox joins the picture. I meet Paul Knox when I get pulled into AGO.
So who pulled you in?
My church person got me in. Marie Lambert nailed it.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
And then Paul Knox gave me the credibility to all the other organists. He may not be an organist, but his business side trumped all of us.
Yeah.
We could use him.
And so about what year was this when you got
Had to be
involved
in the early 80s.
Early 80s, okay. So the chapter was about 40 years old, or almost 35.
It was
30.
And they had done a lot of luminary things. They're probably too snooty in those early years. It was only pipe organs, and you had to be at Union or Manhattan School of Music or one of the better schools. So there was the thems and the us. And I think you guys have realized that Mr. Polo is not about thems or us.
No, it's, yeah.
So I really started to really cater to the part-timers. And I hate to say it, but I probably took the full-timers down a peg.
Well, I mean, most positions are not full-time. And
Right.
if you're gonna, if you're going to have a viable organization, it should be open to anyone who plays professionally, anyone who's interested in the instrument at a significant level of commitment. I mean, it's so you and I know all about your business skills because you've been kind of an agent or a mentor or a godfather to so many of us through the years, including myself, about career development and just how to make things happen. And you and I have always worked well together because we can make stuff happen.
Well, I think that what was interesting is that as in any consulting, organists know the answers. It's just that they don't know how to present their answers to an employer. And Mr. Polo, I was in charge of buying 39 companies around the world and 104,000 people in Kraft Foods. So I was able to just say, a church is no different than a business.
Mm-hmm.
But the product is not Kraft Foods or the Space Telescope. It's God. And one thing nice, you don't have to compete. So all we have to do is share. And look at the things we can do. And what I started to notice as an observer of the organist and our own members is that you aren't all as smart as you think because you're trapped behind your own organ bench every Sunday.
So there's not perspective on what's going on out there.
So you need to get out of that shell and learn from each other, and you need to see what other people are doing. So the traditionalists didn't want to see what the contemporary folks were trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. We had choral festivals, and I invited black gospel choirs because I wanted our members in the 80s.
Which was disappointingly late, but also incredibly early for a lot of people.
But and then the fact that we as a group had invited all of our choirs got to see different conductors. They got to see different ways. So it became much more open. And then what I think our organist members started to see is our choirs really like this. They like to be in these festivals.
People like to collaborate and like to be together and like to make music, right?
And many of us we had done children's choirs together. The Congregational Church was always good about having children's festivals. Mm-hmm. So we had done that, but we stopped doing that because as organists, choir directors, we were busy. Mm-hmm. So it took somebody. I hate to say, one of the things I've done for the Greater Bridgeport Chapter is I've taken away that production problem. Mm-hmm. I was always doing that production problem, and I let you guys do all the real work. Yeah. You guys did the choral direction. You guys did the
you were our production manager.
All I had to do was
for a long time.
I kind of guilted people into it, but guilt's my it's my number one skill.
Yeah. So you got involved with the chapter in the early 80s.
Yep.
And you helped it become more sustainable and a broader and larger membership, and you helped equalize salary. So this was before the National AGO had salary guidelines or any resources on employment, it sounds like.
Right. It was up into when we were so successful, and now we had grown a chapter to 225. And then we decided we organists are not good about traveling from one geography to the other. So Yale, now that we built Yale back up, Yale decided to split away. We split away 80 people from our chapter, and we got the Yale chapter started. But
so we gave birth to the New Haven chapter, rebirth.
And then somebody national, which I was not associated with at all, came to us and wanted us to do the regional, the POE pipe organ encounter, and that was around 2010.
Yeah, I was part of that.
So there was no automation at headquarters whatsoever.
But we hosted a regional before 2000. We didn't host a regional in 2010. The regional
it was not a regional.
We host a regional.
We did a regional in the 90s, but we did it the whole way.
But tell me about the regional.
Well, the regional, we actually, back then, the formula was just all paper, and if you were a treasurer, you took tabs, and you did mailing. It was all paper-based. You still had to raise money from other chapters, very much like the POE, the pipe organ encounter. But the pipe organ encounter, I made my mind up as day one that we're going to automate the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I contact I'm thinking it's AGO National should be an automated group, but when I contact them, I find out zip automation, not just a website.
Yeah.
Nothing. So I kept saying, can I create a URL? They go, you can do whatever you want. So we create this thing. We fund it for like $50,000.
This was a registration system for POEs. This was.
I did that. It was all automated. We automated the whole thing.
Automated what exactly?
Well, we had a website devoted to the thing. We had all of our organists up. We had all of our venues up. Our rehearsal locations. We had everything in photos and pictures. And as we're doing this, AGO National started to realize, boy, our chapter is doing this.
Yeah. So, well, it's amazing to me, like, how far behind National AGO is compared to other organizations, professional organizations I'm a part of.
Well, I wasn't aware of it, but the other thing that happens, POEs and regionals tend to lose money. So AGO would always forward half the money because they would tend to lose it. They didn't want chapters not to
Yeah, chapters don't have the resources to fund that, sure.
So we actually we made $20,000 in profit. So
The chapter did.
and so now they took notice again. So that asked me if I would help National automate the national organization.
Yeah.
So
So
I
you were a part of building OnCard,
I
a vendor built OnCard, and you helped
I became
facilitate.
CIO, Chief Information Officer for the American Guild of Organists, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so
What
part
was
of
that? What was that like?
Well, that was what we started to do. The first thing I implemented was put websites in. We did a national website. I created templates.
So they didn't have a website till after 2010?
No, you know,
AGO didn't have a website?
we didn't have all our websites at that time were read only.
Just static.
There was nothing. There was no interaction. There was no way of interacting. And I was
Mhm.
complaining about what member benefits do you have for that $100 that you're getting for that subscription.
Yeah.
So I was able to shake the tree. Nobody cared. I mean, it was all nonprofit folks. Luckily, musicians were. There was more computer science people as musicians than musicians as computer science people.
Mhm.
So I was able to manipulate them pretty well. And we implemented OnCard. We implemented the national website. I did the Nashville website for the national convention. I did a template for regional conventions, and I did a template for other AGO chapters who did the same thing that Greater Bridgeport had as a website.
So you started working for National about when?
2009 to
Okay.
2011.
And when did you leave that position?
2011.
So you had a big impact in 2 years on the national organization.
And it was interesting, as you know, we always say in the world of nonprofit, but usually they don't get much done because everybody's volunteers their time. So when they came to me, they said, "Would you volunteer to do this role?" I said, "Absolutely not." I said that I find that when people pay, they listen.
Yeah.
So they said, "Well, how much are you going to charge me?" And I said, "I'm going to give you a discount rate of $1,000 a day. I'll bet you will work very efficiently."
So that you were a consultant.
I was a paid consultant, and that irritated not the executive director, but boy, that irritated all the non-professionals. But I said, "You get paid for being an organist. I get paid for being an IT professional."
Yeah, sure. So let's come back to the chapter for a minute. You've been pretty much on the board for since the 80s, right?
Right.
What roles? What are your titles been? I mean, I always thought of you as kind of our Henry Kissinger.
No, I always decided, and this is a Paul Knox thing. Paul Knox was always our senior spokesperson, and he said, that sometimes it pays just to be the person that guides somebody and not be the leader. And I took the place of a treasurer that had been the treasurer for about 20 years. His name was Charles Russell, and he was the organist at St. John's Episcopal across from United Congregation.
Oh, sure. Definitely, yeah, Bridgeport.
And Paul convinced me that to move deans and sub-deans through the chairs, it would be wonderful. It's always better to keep secretaries and treasurers in place for this continuity. So he and I agreed to that. So I was probably the treasurer for 20 years. And in that treasurer position, you're there. We don't have that many meetings, so it was easy enough for me to watch what was going on in all the other areas. So, and I always felt, and even today, I belong to 2 other chapters. I always belong to other chapters wherever I've lived as my second home, so West Palm or Boston or Greenville now and Spartanburg. But I will never take a role as a dean because I don't think the dean is where I'm most helpful in actually helping a dean not be afraid to be a dean, or a sub-dean to not be afraid to be a sub-dean.
Yeah, I mean, I had a blast as dean. It was a great role, and there is a learning curve, and there is some people are not as extroverted as others, or not as pushy, or not as persistent. And
But what Bridgeport has always done, and I think it's because we're so social, that we're not afraid to let our guard down and talk to each other and say, "I need help." Or, "Can you help me with this?" And we always had this wonderful friendship amongst musicians, and anybody involved with the organization, including our choir members that have supported us in the individual churches, we just make things happen.
Yeah. So I think your biggest accomplishment, legacy in the chapter, is the establishment of the Louise Miller and Pauline Knox Scholarship. And
I didn't establish it. It was interesting.
What role did you play in that?
That was Brian Kirk wanted to establish that for Louise, and Dr. Joe took Louise's spot, and she definitely rocked this area.
Yeah.
So Brian saw the idea. I just saw like everything else. I'm a business guy, so I
You
knew
found
how
it
to do
out,
it.
yeah. We got a bequest from the Miller estate towards that, right?
We did. Everything that I have now replicated that in Greenville. We have a Powell scholarship using the same formula. But we're part of a 501c3, and Louise actually gave us the first $10,000 for her own scholarship. So that started, and because Pipescreams has been our bread and butter for generating income, we generated that, and that interest in young people had caused two more people to bequest more money to the organization, to the scholarship, the Powell scholarship. So Paul Knox gave more money. Louise gave more money upon her death. Another organization in our chapter gave more money, and Kathy Powell, which gave us our Powell Foundation,
the Powell brand.
Very, very moved by our bringing young people into pedals, pipes, and pizza Pipescreams.
Well, I feel like our focus as a chapter is very much on supporting the members and bringing the coolness of the pipe organ to new people.
Right.
That's what we're about. We're about education and outreach, and also helping each other.
The treasurer was always one. I never took secretary, but then between Meg and I always did professional concerns.
Yes.
Because we had our share of the biggest problem with organists is organists.
Remember, this is on the internet, John.
That's right. Organists and churches are committees and organists speaking together.
Yeah.
So what I was always able to do is teach the organist not to wait to communicate with your staff parish. Be proactive. Tell them how you do your job. Tell them what it takes to do your job.
Educate them.
Because
a lot of the work is
don't
invisible.
sit there and think that they know the answers. Usually, church committees. I was that chair for Nichols United Methodist Church, so the rest of my committee wasn't familiar with church music or how to hire an organist. So you need to educate them. They're educating you on what their needs are. You got to come together. Don't wait to be asked.
Communicate.
Communicate.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So it's quite a legacy that is still. I mean, you have a scholarship. All you did to further that, creating Pipescreams and supporting the scholarship and making that a model event of its kind nationally. And then all the professional concerns, work you've done, plus the IT and information structure for
We are a model. I think you'll find that you see us written up quite a bit as the model for the national organization. Greater Bridgeport always gets kind of kudos here and there.
Yeah.
So it's good. I mean, but it's again, it's our people, it's our chapter members that made it happen.
Yeah. Well, and you're a huge part of that. I mean, this chapter without you is incomprehensible. The state that we're in now and where you've been. What are you most proud of being a part of in your years in this chapter?
I just think that it's our big events. The choral festivals were absolutely, we knocked out of the park.
Yeah.
Pipescreams year after year, we've knocked out of the park. So those things are the silent films that we brought back to kids. The pedals, pipes, and pizza. Yeah, the POE was fabulous.
It was, yeah.
So it's just being amongst our friends, and we have the wonderful epiphany parties.
Yes, we have
everything we've done with food or at my big home or my pool was all those fun events.
Those were good.
Luckily,
days,
I'm doing those same things in the Spartanburg area, and the fact that we were always, you and I have both been linked to the symphony and the university glee clubs. That always played a part. So, for me to be able to get Fairfield County Chorale to do stuff with us, to get the Mendelssohn group to do with us, I was able to do that with the symphony, and then pull the symphony. So you'll hear at the national level, they talk about Greater Bridgeport has a musical ecosystem that's tied together between the universities, the church musicians, the private schools, and the symphony.
Yeah, we built a community, and again, you've done a lot of that legwork to help make those connections happen.
Right.
What do you think have been the biggest challenges the chapter has faced in your years of being involved?
I just think we have to stay with. We have to be recruiting all the time because people tend to fall away and they fall into their rut. And I don't think this, especially with automation happening and this changing world, you don't want to fall into the cow path. You want to create a new cow path. So technology, especially when COVID hit, I think the biggest thing I was doing right away was teaching people how to use Zoom very, very quickly to hold their choirs together.
as a
to
stopgap.
just to keep some social interaction. Even if they couldn't figure out how to sing, they could at least look at each other and check on each other. And I did that from St. Patrick Cathedral with some of our judges, like Stephen Rapp. You know, and all over the country, people were just reaching out because even small church or big church, you had the same problem.
Yeah.
You had to figure out a way of keeping your group, your flock together. So
Yeah.
it didn't fall apart.
Well, I know you're retiring this month from the world of business
Yeah.
after a long, distinguished career, and I'm just so grateful for your friendship and knowing you and working with you for so many years, and I know that's going to continue.
Well, and everything you learn. I mean, you'll like I'm a transplant now. I moved from Greater Bridgeport to South Carolina. A couple of things happened is because I'm in the national organization. Word spreads fast that he's now at this area.
Yeah.
The American Symphony Orchestra, word move. I'm on the board of one symphony. All of a sudden, that board finds out. It really does help you because I have good seats in the new symphony. I'm solicited right away to be on the board of the chorale. I'm already in several chapters, and I've already been solicited by the national organization to help with the new on-track replacement. So what goes around comes around.
Yeah, you're going to do a lot of cool stuff. What advice or hopes or dreams do you have for this chapter in the next 20 years?
Yeah, I just think we have to roll with the times, and we need to continue what we do. 5 programs a year, something to educate ourselves, something to educate the public, something to get kids involved, and keep having social things around food. Everybody has to eat.
Yeah, great. Well, this is for we're doing these interviews to kind of showcase people who have been such a big part of our history and to document the history because we don't really have any written record of our history.
Right.
Is there anything else you'd like people to know in the present or future about the history of this wonderful chapter?
No, I think I didn't think originally I was the historian. I kept thinking people like Carol Fanslow or they're very, very close to the beginning, the 1948.
Yeah, we did speak to Carol
when the chapter started, and I think that there's some treasure trove of some old paper or someplace. But even in my old directories, as we get ready to have our celebration, I'll dig out some of those old directories so people can see
some of the names.
who are some of the members from the 1995 and some of those original books I still have.
It's fascinating. Well, thanks for talking, and we will continue to gather around food and the organ and bringing the organ to new people.
Right. Thank you.
All right.